Okay, so you've given us such a fascinating mix of ideas and research this time, really uh, digging into the core of what makes us human.
It's a great collection.
Yeah, we're about to take a proper deep dive into, well, our emotions, our behaviors, and that often tricky world of social interactions.
Absolutely. Your sources touch on really everything from our inner experiences like loneliness and happiness, right through to the unspoken rules that shape how we connect.
Or sometimes don't connect.
Exactly. And even the surprising ways our physical state, like being hungry, can impact our feelings.
It's quite a range. We've got discussions around why loneliness might hit young people so hard, what happiness even looks like across different cultures.
The fact that teenage brains are still very much a work in progress.
Oh, definitely that one.
Yeah.
And the surprisingly wide range of reasons we cry, navigating those classic awkward social moments.
Whether a glance can give away your personality.
Right. And the potential upsides of chatting with strangers, that specific kind of dread some people feel about answering the phone.
Which is interesting in itself.
Yeah. And the unexpected usefulness of shame, believe it or not, and even the very real science behind being hangry.
It's quite the landscape we're exploring.
It really is. And our mission, as always, is to really dig into these varied topics, pull out the key insights, and basically offer you a way to understand these complex parts of being human without having to wade through all the original stuff yourself.
Hopefully sparking a few aha moments along the way.
Exactly. So where should we begin? Maybe with those unexpected findings around loneliness.
That sounds like a good starting point. It really challenges some common assumptions.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this. Something that really stood out to me was this idea of who experiences loneliness most acutely. You know, we often picture older folks maybe living alone.
That's the stereotype, isn't it? Reduced social circles, perhaps physical isolation later in life.
But then you look at the English Voice Club survey, and it kind of flips that idea on its head.
Right.
They found that actually 16 to 24-year-olds report feeling lonely more often and, crucially, more intensely.
That's quite a finding. And what's interesting is the perspective from researchers at the University of Manchester. They suggested that this intensity in young people might really trouble them because it's such a period of significant identity change.
Ah, so figuring out who they are.
Exactly. Figuring out who they are, their place in the world, and also, learning how to manage their emotions for perhaps the first time in such complex ways.
It plagues them, as the source said, like troubles them continually. That makes sense when you think about it. It's a lot to juggle.
It really is. And it highlights that loneliness isn't just about being critically alone. That came out in the English Voice Club discussion, too.
Right, you can be in a crowd.
You can be surrounded by people and still feel that deep sense of disconnect if you feel misunderstood or like you don't truly belong.
Which ties into that idea of stereotypes they mentioned, doesn't it? Like those familiar, maybe slightly unfair British ones.
Bad cooking, bad teeth, being reserved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A stereotype is just that, isn't it? A simplified, often inaccurate idea about a group. And the stereotype here is that loneliness is mainly an older person's issue.
Precisely. And while, of course, some older individuals do experience isolation being geographically cut off.
Like that example of Tristan da Cunha.
Exactly, that incredibly remote island. It shows the difference between physical isolation and the feeling of loneliness. The survey suggests the feeling might be hitting younger people harder.
Okay, so from loneliness, let's shift focus maybe to something we generally think of as more positive. Happiness.
But even that isn't straightforward, is it?
No. It turns out that even what happiness means varies quite a bit depending on where you look.
Absolutely. What's often prioritized in, say, Western cultures, individual pleasure, personal achievement,
Getting ahead yourself.
that can look quite different in many East Asian cultures, where the emphasis tends to be more on social harmony, the well-being of the group.
And they mentioned African and Indian perspectives too.
Yes, where happiness might be more deeply connected to shared experiences, strong family bonds, community.
So this is where Helen Russell's Atlas of Happiness comes in.
Yeah.
She explores these different cultural takes.
Exactly. She digs into these diverse approaches. And one particularly insightful concept she highlights is the Japanese idea of wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi, I like the sound of that. What's the core idea there?
Well, it's a traditional Japanese worldview, really. It's about finding beauty in imperfection, appreciating the natural process of aging and decay.
So instead of trying to hide flaws,
You embrace them. You see the beauty in things as they are, complete with their little flaws, their history.
like laughter lines maybe,
Yeah.
or creases, as they put it. Instead of trying to erase them, you actually appreciate them as part of your story.
That's the spirit of it, yes. And it connects to that art form, kintsugi.
The pottery thing.
Right, where broken pottery is repaired, but with gold lacquer. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted, made into a feature. It symbolizes the object's history, its resilience.
That's beautiful. Valuing the journey, not pretending the break never happened.
It's a powerful metaphor. And it's quite different from that English idea of being jolly, which Helen Russell also discussed.
Jolly, yeah. It sounds a bit old-fashioned, maybe. Jolly hockey sticks.
A bit. But the interesting take was that jolly in British culture might be presented more as a way of coping, a sort of resilience.
So less about deep, profound happiness and more about just getting on with it.
Kind of. Putting on a brave face, carrying on with everyday routines, walking the dog, having a simple meal even if things aren't perfect, not making a fuss.
Keeping calm and carrying on, essentially.
Pretty much. And speaking of happiness levels, there was that quiz question, happiest country in 2017, according to the UN report.
Ah, yes. Norway, Japan, or New Zealand? I think I know this one.
It was Norway. The Nordic countries often seem to score highly on these well-being measures.
Right. Okay, let's turn our attention to teenagers now. A group whose behavior can sometimes feel, well, a bit unpredictable.
Ah, yes. But it turns out our understanding of their brain development is actually relatively new.
That surprised me. We think we know teenagers, but the science is still evolving.
That's right. While you get all those stereotypes about them being impulsive or difficult, the understanding that their brains are still undergoing really significant development well into their 20s. That's more recent in neuroscience.
When did that research really start?
The first papers highlighting this properly only came out in the late 1990s.
Wow, that is recent. So before that, the accepted belief, the dogma, as they called it,
A strongly held idea, often unquestioned.
was that brain development was pretty much done in early childhood.
Exactly. The older view was that the brain didn't change much after those early years. But that's just not accurate.
And a key area still developing is the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, that part right at the front of the brain. It's crucial for those higher-level thinking skills, what we call cognitive tasks.
Like decision-making, planning ahead.
Organizing your thoughts, impulse control, all that sophisticated stuff.
Ah, so things like planning out homework, which can sometimes feel like pulling teeth for teenagers.
Exactly. The ongoing development in that specific brain region might help explain why those kinds of tasks can be more challenging during adolescence.
Adolescence being that whole transition period, child to adult.
Right. The brain area needed for that complex planning and forward thinking is still literally maturing.
That's a really helpful perspective. Okay, moving on to tears. Another area with some pretty ingrained stereotypes.
Oh, definitely. The whole men don't cry, women cry easily thing.
But the reality, as the sources suggest, is much more complex. We cry for lots of reasons.
Yes, not just sadness, joy, being deeply moved by something beautiful, even frustration.
And there was that UK study statistic women crying an average of 72 times a year.
Apparently so. And it's interesting to think about why we cry, especially in, say, a work context. Therapist Joanna Cross has some interesting thoughts on this.
Yeah, she talked about the potential downsides of crying regularly at work, didn't she? Like not being taken seriously, getting a label.
Precisely. There's that risk that frequent crying could lead people to perceive you as less capable or less professional, and you might be unfairly judged.
And she also talked about how crying can sometimes be the result of a buildup.
Yes, a buildup of frustration and undealt with situations, things simmering under the surface.
Those feelings of unfairness or unresolved anger, resentments, she called them.
Exactly. They accumulate, creating this backlog of emotional baggage, and then even a small thing.
The final straw moment.
Right. That triggers the weeping, another word for crying. It's like the pressure cooker finally blows.
It really is like a pressure release valve, isn't it? Okay, let's try and navigate the often tricky terrain of social interactions and, well, awkwardness.
Ah, yes, that feeling we all know. Being awkward, that uncomfortable, maybe slightly embarrassed, self-conscious feeling when something in a social situation just feels off.
And a lot of that seems to stem from these unwritten rules, these social rules we all follow, especially with strangers.
Exactly. These implicit guidelines, unspoken but generally understood, like the bus stop example.
Oh yeah, talking about the weather is fine.
Totally fine. But launching into your personal finances with a stranger definitely crosses an invisible line.
Psychologist Dr. Raj Prasad described these rules as incredibly powerful, shaping how we interact, even though we're not usually thinking about them.
And he mentioned breaching experiments as a way to study them.
Right. Deliberately breaking a social rule to see what happens. Like this example of sitting right next to the only other person in an almost empty subway car.
Ooh, you can just imagine the reaction, the discomfort. It perfectly shows how strong these unspoken rules are.
You can almost feel the secondhand awkwardness. Okay, shifting gears slightly, from social rules to something more visual. The idea that our eyes might give clues about our personality.
Yes. This research looked into potential links between eye movements and personality traits, specifically introversion and extroversion.
Introvert being, maybe more shy, less comfortable socially, while an extrovert is more outgoing, confident. And you mentioned, listener, maybe identifying as an introvert sometimes, so this might resonate.
It might. So Sabrina Hopp at the University of Stuttgart did research looking into whether eye movements could actually predict if someone is more introverted or extroverted.
And the interesting part was whether this would even work outside a strict lab setting, in the real world.
Exactly, in an unconstrained setting, as they put it. And apparently their computer program was able to identify differences in people's eye movements, their gaze patterns.
Gaze, just another word for looking.
Right. Differences that correlated with personality traits, even if the researchers couldn't fully figure out, understand completely how it works.
So the what was there, but not necessarily the why.
Pretty much. They could observe patterns, and the program could recognize connections between these gaze patterns and reported personality types. It suggests our personality might subtly guide where we look.
Fascinating. Like, our eyes have a mind of their own, guided by our personality. Okay, now let's tackle something many of us, maybe introverts especially, might actively avoid: talking to strangers.
Yes, there's often that hesitation, isn't there? Driven by that fear of potential awkwardness we just discussed.
But Gillian Sandstrom's research suggests we might be seriously underestimating the upside, thinking it's less beneficial than it is.
Her work indicates we often have this internal negative voice that's anticipating, guessing, or expecting that these chats will be uncomfortable or unwelcome.
We psych ourselves out.
Essentially, yes. We anticipate the worst, but that expectation often doesn't match the reality.
So we imagine disaster, but the other person might actually be fine with a quick chat.
More than fine, potentially. Sandstrom's research found that even really minimal interactions with strangers can actually boost our mood and make us feel more connected.
That's really encouraging. Maybe it's worth trying to pluck up the courage, as they say.
Force yourself to do something a bit scary.
And just strike up a brief conversation sometime. Oh, speaking of words, we had that quiz question about how many words are in the English language.
Ah, yes. Around 170,000, 270,000, or 370,000.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the answer is approximately 171,146 words currently in use.
Wow. So plenty of options for talking to strangers.
Definitely. Now, let's turn to a form of communication that seems to trigger a specific anxiety for many: the telephone.
Oh, yes, the phone call. Even someone as incredibly knowledgeable, someone who knows a lot about the lot, like Stephen Fry, he admits to a strong dislike of it.
And he's a known technophile, someone who loves technology, so that's surprising.
His reasoning is quite interesting. He references a sentiment kind of echoing George Bernard Shaw about English people supposedly despising each other, really disliking each other the moment they speak.
Why? What is it about the voice on the phone?
Fry suggests our voice instantly reveals so much: our age, our social class, our education level, even our vocabulary choices.
And this all happens instantly, in real time.
Yes, with no time for reflection, no context beyond the sound itself. So before you've even really said much, the other person might be making all sorts of assumptions based purely on how you sound.
That's a bit uncomfortable to think about. He called the phone an annoying blip in communication history.
A blip, yeah. Like a temporary glitch or something out of step. It highlights his feeling that the phone, despite being tech, introduces this layer of potential discomfort and prejudgment.
It certainly makes you think twice before dialing, doesn't it?
Oh.
Okay, let's delve into a perhaps unexpected topic: the potential usefulness of shame.
Shame, yeah. That often deeply uncomfortable feeling of embarrassment or guilt. We usually see it as purely negative.
Especially now with social media and public shaming being used to make people feel bad about their actions.
Exactly. But Hedda House offered a more nuanced view. While she absolutely acknowledged that too much shame can be crippling, debilitating, making someone unable to cope.
It can be destructive.
Totally. But she suggested that the right amount of shame, a healthy dose perhaps, can actually affect change. It can motivate us to adjust our behavior for the better.
A very fine line then. Too much is bad, but a little bit might serve a purpose. And Tiffany Watt-Smith brought in that image of the Teflon-coated politician.
That's such a great description. Teflon, the nonstick pan coating, coated meaning covered.
Right.
So a Teflon-coated politician is someone who seems immune to shame, criticisms, scandals. They just slide right off, nothing sticks.
They seem completely unaffected.
Yeah.
By the way, we had that quiz question about Teflon's discovery. When was it?
It was accidental, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the answer might surprise you, not the 60s, but way back in 1938.
See, accidental discoveries lead to useful things and useful analogies. Finally, let's tackle that universally understood, often dreaded feeling, being hangry.
Hangry, that perfect storm, that blend of hungry and angry. It sounds like slang, but there's real science here.
We've known for ages that hunger can lead to irritability, right? Being easily annoyed.
Yeah, but hangry nails that specific mood. And Sophie Medlin explained the biology behind it. It's not just in our heads.
What actually happens?
Well, it's fascinating. Low blood sugar levels trigger the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Our fight or flight response kicks in a bit.
Okay.
And crucially, these same low blood sugar levels also trigger certain neuropeptides, which are chemical messengers in the brain. These signal hunger, yes, but they're also involved in triggering feelings of anger, even intense rage.
Wow, so there's a direct biological link between the hunger signal and the anger signal.
Pretty much. It can also make us more impulsive acting without thinking things through. So it's not just you being unreasonable when you need food.
Good to know. And we had that final quiz question about words like hangry formed by merging two words.
Yeah, those clever combinations. They're called portmanteau words.
Well, this has been quite a journey through the fascinating landscape of human emotions and behavior. We've covered so much.
We really have. From the complexities of loneliness right through to why you shouldn't skip lunch if you want to stay calm.
And hopefully, these key insights we've pulled from your diverse sources offer you, our listener, a valuable shortcut to understanding maybe your own experiences a bit better.
And also those subtle forces that shape how we interact with everyone around us.
So, maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering everything we've discussed, from that potential for intense loneliness, especially among young people, to the surprising mood boost you can get from just talking to a stranger.
Big contrast there.
Right. What small shift, maybe, might you consider making in your daily life? Perhaps reaching out to someone you haven't connected with? Or even just trying a brief, friendly word with someone you bump into?
It's definitely thought-provoking. And look, if any of these topics really sparked your curiosity, there's so much more out there to explore on each one. They're endlessly fascinating areas.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your thoughtful collection of sources with us. It's always a real privilege to take these deep dives together.
Well,
Likewise.
Until the next one.
Until our next exploration.